Welcome, listeners, to the Traveler Chronicles, where the enchanting world of Extrayus comes to life. I'm Dungeon Master Eguile, your guide through the pivotal scenes in our thrilling Dungeons & Dragons Homebrew campaign. Join us as we embark on adventures with the Travelers, a diverse group of heroes, each with their own unique reason for traveling the world. Together we'll explore the rich lore and vibrant landscapes of Extrayus, filled with magic, mystery, and unforgettable moments. And don't miss out on our special segment, Traveler's Tidings with Luna, where reporter Luna, played by my wonderful wife, DNDWife, interviews intriguing characters from our world, bringing their stories to life in delightful, immersive conversations. Whether you're a seasoned dungeon master seeking inspiration or a newcomer eager to dive into a fantastical journey, the Traveler Chronicles has something for everyone. So grab your gear and prepare for adventure. The world of Extrayus awaits. Welcome back, travelers, to another episode of Traveler's Chronicles. I'm DM Eguile, joined by DNDWife, and today we're diving into one of the most pivotal moments of our Homebrew D&D campaign, the grand finale of our prologue.
For those just tuning in, our campaign takes place in the world of Extrayus, where our players have been navigating a high-stakes tournament in the holy city of Arnknoka. But tonight's episode marks a turning point. This is where everything shifts, and our heroes realize just how dangerous their journey will be.
We'll be breaking down the structure of the long-form tutorial in a homebrew world, explore how we built tension and mistrust amongst the players, and reflect on how this moment shaped the entire campaign. Also, we'll be joined by two of our players, Entlynk, who plays Bog Bean, and Thomas, who plays Captain V, for a roundtable discussion on what this moment meant to them.
So strap in, because tonight we're diving into the deep end. And hey, if you enjoy the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps us out a ton. Now, let's get started.
So, obviously, this is our third campaign, and we've been talking about it now for quite a few episodes.
Oh, yeah.
And at this point of recording, this campaign's probably been going on for almost 2 years.
A couple years at this point, yeah, coming on.
And so what this actually is, I think, about 4 sessions in at this point. And so it seems kind of weird as we introduce it being kind of this long-form tutorial prologue, but I kind of needed to have this happen for a bunch of reasons. And given that it was our third campaign start and I had tried some experimental stuff with campaign 2, we'll have to get into that in another episode.
Yeah.
But I wanted to try something different. And the biggest reason is we were using this like new homebrew world that I was also kind of building at the same time.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to figure that out. But what first really came to me was that I had a lot of new players, and it wasn't just like new to me, but like new to D&D.
Yep.
And so that's kind of tough because I had a situation where I had a new player, and with that, they suffered a little bit in the beginning because they started at like level 13, and it was hard kind of trying to teach them within the story and learn. Quick, and I feel like a lot of their kind of development was stunted because of how much it took to learn.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that like inside of like starting a story, you're kind of like basically the video game logic, right? Like you're getting your tutorial included in your story, so you don't really know you're getting your tutorial.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like you're being taught anything.
Yeah, but you're just instinctively learning through, you know, positive reinforcement and mechanics, right? And so the other reason too is that it's like it's a homebrew world. So the other part is like most of my players are like very experienced in D&D 5e literature and lore.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets to a point where it's like, oh, well, if I even name something, they already know what it is, what its stat block was, you know, its lore, what to do, how to beat it. Now they're trying to go, okay, I know all this, how do I act like I don't?
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, we'll also, if we're going to create a world from scratch, my new players also need to get time to kind of learn what the mechanics, the rules, the lore, all of that, because without that, they're not going to really know how to play.
And it has to go slow enough so that they feel comfortable learning. And it like you said, it doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel like they're being forced into something.
Yeah. And because also we kind of started, you know, we wanted this campaign to start and be very much a, like, you are new people, you knew. And because of the essentially the creation of this new homebrew world, it really made it that way.
Yeah, it was awesome.
But because of that, with no like extra lore or something you can tap into, you needed a bit more time, or kind of to almost be force fed a little bit more information. Otherwise, you're going to just kind of be running amok, still kind of not knowing, like that. You know, you'd be stepping on a
on this
landmine
blank slate.
when it's like, oh, well, everybody knows these are there. It's like, well, we didn't. You know, so there was a lot of information that had to be, you know, done. And then the other thing, biggest one for me, is that like low level players make a lot of dumb mistakes.
Yeah, we do.
And in doing so, especially when you have players who have played high level characters, you still kind of have like this like de facto, we're still golden gods, even though it's a new character. So you're like, oh yeah, I'm used to having like 180 HP and like a 28 armor class, and I could cast 9th level spell.
Right.
Well, now you're level 1 and you have 4 HP.
Or if you're new and you're coming off like playing video games, you're like, oh, I can just respawn.
Right. And so there's a lot of times where it's like, okay, you know, you want to also give opportunities for mistakes, but also, you know, not having that fear too, because a lot of times I see is like, if you know, if you're a veteran player, like you obviously know, okay, hey, I'm not trying to, you know, if I'm a wizard, I have to be careful. I have 6 HP.
Right. I can't be running in.
I'm not going to do anything dumb until I have at least shield, and I have a couple spells, and I have a couple of health pots.
Maybe some friends with me.
Now I'll play the game.
Yeah.
Now I'll play the game. So it was really more of like, okay, well, how do I also make it where they're not, you know, I wanted to make sure people weren't just innately afraid of, getting killed right off the bat. And they're like, okay, well, all this work I just made to do a backstory and I died in the first game.
Yeah, that really sucks. And we had that happen. The very first game we ever tried to play was in the Mines of Pandelver. You know, we were trying the starter pack, and it was just 3 of us, and of course you, the DM, and our rogue was, I think he was the first. It was the first roll, right?
Yeah.
It's the first roll of the whole campaign, first combat, and it's a wolf attacking him, and the wolf crits.
Yep. Right. It's like, wins initiative, so obviously goes first, and then crit, double his health, done.
And he's gone. And it's like, oh, and then you read the rules afterwards. You're like, this means your character's gone.
Right, and we didn't know if there was like, potions, or if like if you got a health potion. It's like, no, at this point, your character's just gone.
Nothing.
Rip your piece of paper up, start over.
Yeah, and you're like, we can't do that. Let's go back.
Yeah, and so like, you know, and it's funny because then that player, you know, for a while played very cautiously,
super carefully.
I mean, I think not until like level 6 or 7 did they actually start like moving any distance away from the party or anything, like or put themselves in. It was always overly protecting themselves because they were so worried about dying again.
Right. I remember he would, every time we moved through a building or something, he would lay down caltrops behind us as he went, but then he didn't think about us having to leave the same way we came, and so he'd have to pick them up as we went.
Yep. Like, you know, and the other thing too is, I feel like for long form campaigns, which is what we kind of focus on mostly for us, because they are it's kind of what my players and myself like to play most of all. And so I also like this long extended intro because it does allow me to introduce like, you know, the villains and the antagonists and some of the more dynamics, because what I find is, you know, there's like this misnomer, right? So, and this is for like a lot of DMs, is you watch like Critical Role.
Yeah.
And you see Matt be able to make these like long monologues, and their enemies can say their piece and do all that. Does not happen at regular tables.
No.
If I try to monologue, either the players will already attack and just straight up go like, we move to attack.
Yeah, we're not going to stand for this.
The moment that any guy says something either that's offending them or gives them any form of justification to attack first, that's going to happen. It's done. And whatever that guy has to say, even if say, okay, they can't kill him and he disappears, there's never really an opportunity where the character. So what I figure is better is kind of these more of like checks in, checks out, right? Like they come in, they say kind of their piece, and then they're gone. Yeah. They never really have to take that opportunity to monologue. They let whatever they've done or whatever they've planned.
They're like really, Swiper.
Kind of, yeah, a little bit, right? Because they come in that subtlety of them just kind of doing something. It's like, okay, we know when this person around something bad or something no good happens, or you know, you never quite know what they're up to. And to me, that was always a better way of introducing. And when you have like these kind of a longer prologue or like tutorial, as I called it, you can introduce your villains much more subtly instead of being like, all right, they reveal themselves. Okay, this is the bad guy. They monologue for 10 minutes, tell you everything they've done wrong. And it's like, okay, that's the bad guy. He flies off. That's our story. We have to kill that guy.
Yeah, he's gone.
Instead, it's more of this kind of organized, you know, where you're being led through. And it's like, okay, we still don't know exactly who, you know, there's jerks. There's people that are doing some stuff that some people question. But at this point in the story, the level at which the antagonist or the villain was never really quite understood. It was still at this point the mad scientist with creepy features, right?
It was just
and in the realm of fantasy, although that's scary, it's not necessarily to the level of like, okay, that's not something we can't handle at a low level.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, definitely big mouth. Oh, he might be like like a werewolf or some kind of creature, but it's not necessarily that big of a deal in fantasy. Now, in real world, obviously that sucks. But, within that realm, it's not, that big of a deal.
True.
So as always with the Traveler's Chronicles, we look usually at one kind of pivotal scene or moment within the campaign because as we figure it's so hard and there's so many other, D&D things out there, and listening to all the minutia is always kind of a little difficult. Yeah. But for the moment, or the scene that we're looking today that we really kind of opened up with, was really kind of what I interpreted as the DM subtly telling his players that, okay, the handicap button is off. It is now everybody's, the guns are loaded. Everything is ready to go. There are real bullets, there's real blood. And now it's time to focus because everyone is now a free-for-all.
Yep, the game has begun.
And it really started with the point of, obviously, at this moment in the story, as we come to round 3, it's obviously known that the two parties, with both teams being the victors, that they're going to be going against themselves.
Yeah.
But obviously, at first, this is viewed as something of, okay, it's a way to test the party's strength. And, okay, we get a little bit of a scene of who on the team is actually more powerful.
A mini battle royale.
Right, like which group can see. And that was, I think, what some of you might have been actually looking forward to. But where this changes up is as they arrive, the travelers arrive to the kind of arena grounds, they're told that there's going to be a change in the rules.
Yeah. A big one.
And in doing so, the rules being that this would be now a fight to the death. Now, this obviously overturns, and if you've been listening to past episodes,
a hard
with
rule.
The rule of this land being that there's no blood to be spilled. Like, you're not supposed to kill anyone. You're not actually supposed to draw really blood. It's meant to be this peaceful area where no one can be afraid of having their life taken. And so obviously, this becomes quite of a shock to the player groups, but it is during this scene that a lot gets kind of taken notice by some of the players as they kind of see, because the individual doing this, being the chieftain of the Tuscari people, is kind of having different features and effects on their body, with their smile being much more distorted, which is actually taken notice by Bog Bean. And in doing so, asking, obviously she kind of runs it up the chain to Bricky, because that's anything, Matthias related, and to which, they kind of start to try to figure out, and it's actually in a pretty decisive insight roll, that they're able to kind of discern that it is very similar, and they start to realize. And at this point in the story, is like, I don't think they knew that Matthias was a shape changer.
No.
So it was more of that. Obviously, something was different. But as this discovery was made and seeing this opportunity, that's when yet again Bricky is brought into question, as Matthias speaks in this kind of foreign language that none of the players understand. And all of a sudden Bricky removes this kind of stone that he had on him when you guys had as the travelers had him when he returned from his fugue state. But as he watches, he just kind of chucks the stone into the arena. And it's at this point that none of you had taken notice beforehand, but the arena had what seemed to be in a kind of intricate lattice kind of drawn into it through some method as these kind of red glow began to overtake the arena grounds. As the kind of travelers watched, as many people began kind of trying to scatter as the Mirren tried to kind of escape from the situation. But the biggest thing was that in the middle of the arena, as we've discussed, is the Eternal Rock, right? So this stone that kind of almost looks like a lightning bolt jolting from under the ground.
Yeah, like it got stabbed into the ground.
Right, yeah, and it's just been
force.
buried, and it's and it was riddled with the handprints of all the Mirren tribes. But as it was, it looked to be kind of being taken over by some kind of otherworldly kind of entity or creature. And doing so, they watched as kind of the sky begin to change, because at this point, this was during a special lunar moment where the two moons were intersecting each other, creating an eye.
The eclipse of the eye.
The eclipse of the eye. And in doing so, the eye, what originally was more of this kind of bluish green hue, changed to bright reddish and orange. And became more of kind of like an Eye of Sauron kind of esque eye. That began looking down, and as that was occurring, the travelers kind of watched as many of the Mirren kind of begin almost changing and shifting into forms, into these kind of grotesque demonic forms, and began like attacking and killing the various Mirren around. And in doing so, the party does attempt to fight kind of whatever this entity that is wrapping around the Eternal Stone, while also trying to keep off any of the imposing Mirren that are now transforming around them, because it also is that point of, are these Mirren? What are these? Are we hurting friend or are we killing foe? So, I mean, it became this big kind of struggle that as they kind of fought this corruption and kind of realized they weren't making much of an impact, it was that call to retreat, as they kind of realized that this was a fight that they weren't going to win, as they watched as one of the slain Minotaur began to warp into this grotesque undead creature, and another creature that seemed to come down from the giant eye kind of entered into the frame. And this kind of moment that is what the scene was built around, is that as the travelers are kind of fleeing from the arena, it is just kind of these three imposing figures. They don't chase, they just stay. As the travelers merely are only able at this point to kind of flee through what is now just the ravaged Arnknoka, as many Mirren are transforming and slaying one another as the party is just trying to make its way out. And to me, why this scene was so important was just because that to me is your opener. Your cutting out. We got there the long way, but now it is this scene where, okay, the stage is set. The bad guys have shown themselves, and it's now the real. Like, there is life, there is death, there is something going on.
We've got background, we've got characters, we've got development. Now it's time to get the ball rolling.
Right.
So it was really fun, I think. I appreciated the battle scene.
Yeah, and my thing, too, the reason also is that I feel like this also cemented a big thing within the party, because even now in the campaign, there is a lot of, no one quite knows what everyone's alignment is or what everyone's kind of true motive is, even now where we are currently in the story. And so this, I think, was the one of the major wedges that would have otherwise been probably a quicker team up, with the Matthias kind of commanding Bricky and just kind of looking like nonchalant and performing that act, really started to kind of, I think, no matter what the player Eric tried to do, that seed of mistrust was very much taking root.
Yeah, and it was not going to go away with just like a few deflecting words.
Yeah, because I mean, that's why I really wanted it to be the kind of like the start, right? So like as we've gone through like the whole thing with Arnknoka, it's always been kind of this like, oh look, peace, love, everybody's doing okay, no one kills each other, and it's like, okay, this is a facade, right? This is never going to be the reality. This is, it's like, it is just to show you, give you an opportunity to start the game, learn some things, but really, you should have been waiting for this. Like, this was coming.
It was coming. And I think it was great, too, because in a way, it helps us get more of an idea. Those of us who are not the character get an idea of what that person is about. We get a little insight. And if we don't, we get that suspicion. And then we start, like, hammering away at it, being like, well, what is this, Bricky? And that started this whole, like, inquisition process for us eventually.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like it also started to open up a lot more into the backstories for people. And to me, too, it's like, so when we first started, it was very much this contained area, because it's like, okay, you're in Arnknoka and it's the city kind of area, but it's still kind of outside, inside. Yeah. But for now it's okay. Now you have the whole continent, because everybody's scattering everywhere. It's not just like, oh, okay, your next destination up the road. It's like, at this point, what I really loved about it was your characters are fleeing and don't know where to go, because also the players are fleeing and they don't know where to go. So it's not like, if you play a regular, 5e rule and you're like, oh, well, okay, well, we know we're near this town, so we can follow the road. It's like, where do we go?
Yep.
And to me, that was like the ultimate point in the story, where the players truly were like, okay, the whole map now just opened up to us, because there was nothing really pointing them to one direction.
No, we got out of there with the quickest route we possibly could. It was like the closest road to where our cart was. It's like, get out, get out, get out. There's attack coming.
Yeah, right. And it really also changed it up, because it very much was, one, showed you that danger was everywhere. In that it wasn't just necessarily going to be always like, oh, it's this fight. Once it's set up, that's the story. Yeah. As well as, trying to, make enough of a kind of threat of these, this trio of demons that are like not supposed to be here, but somehow are. And, the whole premise was, from the epilogue or the beginning, the one thing you knew was, okay, demons aren't here.
Yeah.
Well, now they are.
Yep.
And so I felt like that really kind of showed them that, look, not only is this in somebody's, in a couple of your guys' backstories, but it's also going to be a major facet of this campaign and this story.
Absolutely. We're going to have to contend with the fallout of, us escaping this without really doing much about it. Not that we could necessarily.
True.
But we are still going to have to, deal with whatever we left behind.
I think the biggest thing with this is it was kind of that final kind of point. And I think it's done in the D&D official catalogs. It's done in a lot of DMs. You always got to show your players that moment where escape is the option.
We have to, yeah.
Because there's a lot of times where, like you were saying, video games, other stories coming from you're like, oh, well, it might be tough, but we'll slug it out.
Yeah.
Three of us might die, but we'll revive. It's like, no, you have to sometimes give them the word. It's like, look, you will not win. It is meant to run away. You need to learn a lesson that not all fights need to be won or fought.
Yep.
And that's kind of, to me, always like the final point, because it also sends them reeling, right?
Yeah.
And most things, it's, you always want revenge on the thing that sent you running.
Right.
So that's now your motivation.
Yeah, and we got to get stronger. So we got to get the montage right before.
But, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not trying to make everyone feel necessarily helpless. It's like, you're just not ready yet. And it's that whole thing, you always want to do it early.
Yeah.
Because if you wait till level 5, level 6 to start introducing your big bad guy, well, now your big bad guy better be a whole hell of a lot stronger, because they're going to come at you at level 10, 11, 12, and now they're throwing, the guy originally was powerful, but after a few level ups, he's a joke.
Yep.
So I really wanted to start with, okay, they are at this pinnacle, this is just beyond everyone around you, but obviously you guys are level 1 and 2.
Yeah, so we can't take that on.
You got room to grow.
It's gonna take time.
And it was the nice thing is that you can bring a lot of things to players that aren't just levels, right? So we've been talking about Arnknoka in the fact that, they're gaining other things outside of the normal rules. This is why I love Homebrew, right? I don't have to follow what D&D necessarily says you should have. If they want a second subclass, they can have a second subclass. Yeah. If you want to give your barbarian, grandmaster fighter moves and stuff, who cares? But that gave them accomplishments that made them more powerful without just necessarily making them a higher level.
Yeah, true.
And that was a big deal too, because this scene too, if we were doing something like probably Milestone, it'd be like, oh, everyone levels up. No, there was nothing.
No.
It was also a show of, it's going to be one of those campaigns where the levels aren't just being given for free.
Yeah, they don't just come, every time. We have to work hard, and they have to be meaningful too. It's not just like, oh, you did something big. Yeah.
All right. Well, as we've been starting to do with all of these new Traveler's Chronicles for the new year, we've been starting to kind of do a roundtable discussion with some of my players that join us to have their points of view on the scene or ask various questions of me. And tonight we have joining us is Entlynk, a.k.a. Bog Bean's player, and Thomas, who is also Captain V's player, who also happened to be the other couple at the table.
Thank you for joining us, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, even in tandem.
It just shows how perfect.
Yeah.
So obviously we're just kind of talking about that moment of kind of that reveal of, Dr. Matthias and his kind of true form
The
and all
smiley
that.
man, as we knew him.
Now, obviously, as we pointed out, Bog Bean, you probably have the biggest connection with Matthias. Was that kind of a moment where you're just like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to fight this guy anytime soon?
Right.
Yeah, she keeps trying, and I feel like this is where she realizes how big of a hold he has. He's not just the traveler she met on the side of the road that gave her a hard time. He has real power, and he's got all these connections that she didn't see. And I think that's what I like, just as a player outside of the game, where I like how it's all connected. All the strings seem to point to one source almost, or at least interconnected to other big threads.
I get you. I like that.
Yeah, and I think this was kind of interesting to me, and I don't know if it was intentional, but I feel like this event also did a lot to mask, and now this is for you, Captain V, with Captain V's kind of that whole discovery of him being a Mirren. But I feel like because of this event, that storyline really got buckled under.
It got overshadowed.
And still hasn't really been used as a major story yet in the campaign.
We haven't explored it.
Was that something you weren't necessarily looking at, or did that just be intentional?
I feel like it's probably his potential later. It definitely was eye-opening at the time, and it was impactful, but yeah, it did get overshadowed, but for a very good reason. So I mean, it's hard to say with everything that's been going on, it needs time to itself, it's better that it builds up and becomes something instead of oh hey, here you go, let's just solve this thing.
Eventually he'll go on a journey to find himself and his
go on
place
a
in the world.
quest.
Yeah.
Discover himself.
He is Mirren.
Now, the big thing for me, too, is, and luckily we have both of you, is that you are our new players. Now, did you feel like you were going through an extended tutorial, or was it pretty subtle?
Yeah.
I think it was pretty subtle.
I felt like it was subtle. There was enough story where I don't think I got the minutia of it, especially last time we talked about the intricacies of Bog Bean's first lesson, I guess, with another mentor type character. And I obviously got more insight from you about it, but I knew that it was teaching me things as a new player. I knew that the spotlight was going to me because of that reason, but I didn't know all of the in-depth of it. But I feel in general, this extended prologue, it didn't feel like we were being taught. It didn't feel like we were being handheld in that way. But at the same token, this finale I felt was a successful here you go, certificate of completion. Now what the hell are you gonna do?
Yeah, to me it was always it's when the party comes together is when they're first emotionally scarred as a group.
Oh, 100%.
Right,
I mean,
that's
people
the trauma bond.
Yeah.
Trauma.
Exactly.
Jinx.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Exactly, because most campaigns it starts with everybody sharing their individual thing, right? It's oh, I'm from this, I'm from that, and it's but then that still doesn't necessarily connect to them. Now it's okay, you traveled for a bit. Oh, now you're all not gonna sleep for a while because you're all just totally PTSD'd on this.
Right. Even basic battle doesn't really do that. If you're just dealing with bandits on the road, that's
kobolds.
not really right, because you feel like you're fairly evenly matched. It doesn't really feel too crazy. But when we're dealing with some sort of threat level that we can't
Right.
even.
Freaking Knights of the Apocalypse kind of stuff.
Yeah, like how are we supposed to fight that? We're level 1, maybe 2 at this point.
I
I
think we're
think.
level 2.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh.
But now it feels like we're in this together. We have like common cause, you know?
Yeah, because
Yeah,
now we
like a
all hate
common goal.
High
Matthias.
School Musical
We've
show,
all got
yeah.
beef with him for one reason or another.
It does owe me money.
So D&D wife, what would you say was probably the most surprising part for you on that one? Because you were the veteran, so you've seen now two openers.
True. I was not expecting the Bricky Rock thing because I had not seen The Rock. I think it was only a couple of players that had seen The Rock, so my character had not. So I had no idea, didn't know, and it was just crazy to see him throw it down and start that whole thing up.
Yeah.
And then having the demon descend from the moon, that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I tried to create cool scenes.
I like demon stories and stuff like that, so this is really cool.
Like, to me, I don't know. It's like, as a DM I'm like so visual in my head. I always look at this scene as like how like I imagine it visually as a way of like trying to describe it. But to me, it's like I'm always there. I'm like, oh man, I wish I could actually be there.
Yeah, right. I mean, I can picture it in my head. It's so clear because it was so well, like, I don't know, just described.
Impact.
Yeah, I really liked the eye motifs because I believe it also had like eyes opening up throughout the sky.
Yeah.
That was a moment for me where I could really kind of, because I have a aphantasia where I can't always see in my mind's eye, but that I remember being very clear, where just like the little like pops of like eerie eyes coming out of the sky and the clouds and like
I try to use for like the demons a lot of like body kind of stuff, and, you know, so like Matthias is his mouths, and so the demon that had to reduce is all eyes, so it's all eye things it's going to be part of, which we've learned later with like Mr. Peepers and all that, and some of the other ones, the other dream demons you guys face later, they're all kind of related to like eyes or ocular kind of thing.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
The eyes also give you like big scale too, right? Like it doesn't make you feel like, oh, it's small, like I can't do anything. It makes you really open up, seeing like, hey, this literally is just bigger.
Yeah.
And then seeing that in miniature form too,
Yeah.
because the miniature is pretty large as well compared to our little tiny ones.
Yeah, there are some times that I do
guys.
like that about minis, because like you guys have them for so long that it does kind of create that scaling when I can put a very large mini next to it. Like, here's the bad guy, and you're like, okay, if I know how big my character is, so if that's that big, you know, like with Tobias,
I know
like
how
7
tall a
feet tall.
human is, like
Yeah.
a person is.
It's like okay, yeah.
It's like 2.5 bog beans right here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Measuring
sure.
in bog beans.
when the mini takes up like a quarter of the table.
Yeah, I know that's
true.
That's a lot of end game stuff. That's always fun
It
too.
brings
Where
the
it's
sharp
like,
When I
dragon
see
to
it in the
mind.
shops, we'll like
Yeah.
see stuff in the game shops, and I'm just like, whoa.
it's like the top shelf stuff, where because it's the box is so big it doesn't fit into the cabinetry,
Yeah.
so it has to go on the top.
It's like a $200 mini. Some of them.
More
some
now.
of them.
Oh yeah,
We
like
got-
a Tiamat.
Yeah, luckily we have Dan, the
Yeah.
player of Drexla, who has a lot of those
Yeah.
large minis.
That's really cool.
He's contributed heavily to
And
some
a lot of our
the
good
stories.
shots. Yeah, definitely for sure. Obviously, with this, if this is kind of time, if you guys have any questions you want to direct towards me through the scene, this is obviously a good time if you wish.
Sure.
I'm all ears.
This was a really satisfactory tie-in with Matthias, but were there any other like scenarios that you were tossed between, like of ways of introducing his like tie, I guess, or his thing?
Yeah, the funny thing is, it was the reason even Matthias is there is Bricky's fault.
Yeah.
And this all ties
Knew it.
into
Taking that hit.
in previous episodes. It's like when he fell unconscious,
And lost Shad.
He was unable to be divined on, so like he couldn't be tracked.
Okay.
So this caused Matthias to have to show up and be like, okay, is Bricky dead?
Yeah.
And so my original intention was he was not there. That was going to go off on its own, and it was just going to introduce the dream demon, and that's it.
Okay.
As a way to not show that they were connected.
Yeah.
But because he was there, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and now show the trio because they are working as a trio, and I might as well now go even bigger and to make it even more of a threat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it paid off for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, because I feel like sometimes over-interacting with a bad guy gets you guys to be a little too comfortable. And it's like, oh, well, he's just doing shenanigans. He hasn't really, like, outright done anything. So he might be, if we don't... It's like, no, he has a plan, and you might want to get in the way of it, because if it's allowed to keep going, more crap like this is going to happen.
And if it's just one, we tend to be like, well, there's more of us than there are of him. We can take him on. But if there's 3 of them and they're all huge, it's like, whoa, we might want to rethink this a little bit. They can work together.
Yeah.
You know?
And so that's why it was always kind of that funny, because I think Eric asked me the same thing, and it was like, no, this is your fault.
Yeah.
Like, literally, this is entirely your fault.
But it worked out perfectly.
And that's half the way a lot of, like, the narrative events happen, and you know, like, DNDWife will ask me, or, like, Richard will be like, oh, it's like, no, that was completely random.
Yep,
that just happened because here's how it went, and that's how I feel like it would going, and it wasn't really, like, something really thought out. It's just sometimes... It's just better to go by the seat of your pants.
So, like, did that, I guess, make the tournament more prominent? Like, having that change in pace or change in character?
And I even told you guys that the tournament was all dice. I did not play with the matchings. I kind of wanted you guys to fight against each other earlier, because then you actually would have been able to fight each other. Yeah. Because if it would have been in the early round, it wouldn't have mattered. It would be like, okay, one of them will advance. You know, it was... No matter what, like, one of you was going to make it to finals.
Yeah.
No matter what. One of you was going to make it to finals. But I was hoping it would be like you guys would fight early, so it'd be like, oh, cool, they can learn against each other, and they can try out without knowing, and they can reveal some of their little tricks. But then it was like, oh, okay, no, they're not going against each other. Yeah. Okay, they're not going against each other. And then it's like, okay, they're going to the finals. Well, okay, this kind of makes it really easy, you know? And so, and the other thing, too, was it was going to be if... they were going against anybody who was going against something else, they were going to have to fight the zombified version of whatever that team was, because I had to introduce the power of the third demon. Yeah. So it was like you also circumvented a fight completely, so you didn't have to fight enemies with the corruption. Yeah. Because before it was just against the corruption. So that would have been the corruption plus 3 more enemies.
Oh. That would have...
Which could have changed that fight.
Yeah. That might have been
that could have knocked out somebody. But because it was both of you, there wasn't someone else in the arena.
Whew, that's a good thing.
And this was all just based off of like a quick little like thing that I wrote up when we did the first story. But I wanted the dice to make the decision.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, because it leaves it completely up to chance.
Right? That's D&D, right?
Then you can't say, oh, the DM did it on purpose.
Yeah. He has it out for us.
Yeah. Right?
He only tried to kill me
but I
multiple
did want to
times.
ask, since you kind of asked us, what is your favorite part of that whole scenario?
You guys running away. I mean, as much as that sounds like, oh, he wants to be, it's like, no, it's just having the foresight to not be just the dumb run-in. Yeah. Because then what ends up happening is then it becomes the other kind of trope where it's like, oh, we're going to go fight. You're obviously going to lose. And then it's like, okay, you lose. And it's like, oh, you're all left unconscious while the enemy goes, oh, I hope you learn from this as they get. No! It's either that or I end the story, right? It's either some plot armor bullshit shit that is like, oh, this magical 9th level priest, which we say don't exist and don't use, you're on a continent that doesn't use magic. You know, they're not going to be like, oh, these magical herbs from Jaconda will just make you go back to life. You know, it just, so it was more of, good, you guys learn, and it was like, okay, this is the story now, like this is where it can play, because they now know what to do, they know who the enemies are, they know who to trust, they've at least got some contacts, they know generally the direction of certain tribes. This is a real game now,
and they learned the most important final piece. When you need to run away,
right? And so that was so to me that was like, to me, it was like the proving that the prologue and the tutorial and doing all that extra work proved true.
Absolutely. I think we were all of us, the veterans and the newbies, felt way more prepared for the upcoming, like, just openness of the world, the openness of our options to do whatever we wanted.
Because that was, right, because that's my worry. It's like, if you just start at that at jump, it's like, to me, it's always like your first playthrough for Skyrim. Yeah. And if you just ignore the first, like, quest and you're just like, you just happen to, like, not put the quest marker on and you just go off. Yep. You're just like, okay, cool, the whole map's available. Where do I go? But then you sometimes just end up in one corner and you never explore any more of the map because you're too afraid to go anywhere else, or you get so lost in the story that you haven't taken a chance to explore anything else. I mean, it's just kind of the way game mechanics work if you're not careful.
If you're not paying attention, especially those games that are like deliberately like that, like you have to go looking for the answers. They're not just going to hand them to you.
Well, it kind of relies on like, you already kind of knowing the language or seeing the signs, like that video game language or whatever game it is. Like, it knows how to point you if you can even pick up on it.
Yeah,
I mean, little breadcrumbs can help lead, like
They give hints.
small like visuals or just small indications help lead you to someplace you never would have gone to or guessed.
Absolutely.
You know, and that early on really did like truly impact, I think, how everyone like saw. It also did teach we should run, we should leave. I mean, other times that I've been like, no, I don't think I want to get hit like a truck ran over me again. But like, it prepares you to see that other people who are more experienced than you go, maybe we shouldn't do this.
Yeah, right.
Maybe this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
To me, like I really love this part because to me this is when like this like it really goes off the rails, and to me the biggest reason I say that is because it started that way.
Yeah.
Like when we just allowed the players to just like start playing, right? And we had the whole Bog Bean eating Miguel's tail and like all of it just going wild. And as we continue on the story with the next scene, which will be in our next episode, it just shows that the whole story is staying that way. Yeah. Even though there was this like moment of peace, the chaos was just waiting on the outside, waiting for the party to get back out, and it just instantly went back into that. And it just makes me kind of excited for obviously we're a little bit delayed on where we are in the story now, but really at that point I was just like, man, okay, now the story can go anywhere. So I had to be ready for anything, and I felt like that made us all on the same kind of excitement where it's like, yeah, what you go to next will be what we build next.
Right.
And so from then on out, it was, you guys are not only building the map, you're building the story, and you're building the world.
Yep. It felt so cool.
Oh, for sure.
No, the sandbox really began at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I liked it. The freedom is strangely, because I know sometimes that can be a little intimidating, a little scary. But the way that you introduced it with the tutorial really helped us, I think, feel more comfortable. You
know, I hate that idea that it needs to be like, oh, session 0, everything got to get done. Everything has to be introduced, ready to go. Everyone's good. All right, focus and fight. I think, you know, one, we're mostly introverts, and how many friends have you made off of like just walking up to them and saying, hi, let's do a group project? Right? None of us have ever done that. You go, oh God, I gotta do a group project. No one make me do anything. So you really gotta kind of get your, you know, and allow people to have their characters be by themselves, to have them kind of test, okay, who do I bounce off well? Who's my jokester buddy? Who's gonna be my, you know, my rival? Who's gonna be my Sasuke to my Naruto, you know? And so by doing that over the course of a few sessions, a few weeks, you allow those bonds to be even stronger. So now as we go and we see later, there's so much more depth. Like people actually care about each other's backstories because it might have more to teach you about the world and the lore. So it's like, no, we want everyone to share. Please don't hide anything because you might know some key to that unlocks another chunk of story for someone else.
Yep, we've had that happen before. So
that's and it's going to happen again a bunch of times.
Yep.
and again.
Right?
Again.
So much.
In ways we've never heard before.
But that is a wrap on another episode of the Traveler's Chronicles. Obviously, a huge thanks to Entlynk and Thomas for joining us tonight and sharing your experiences.
Yes, thank you guys. Always a blast.
Always fun.
Obviously, this was a huge moment in our campaign, and we always love breaking it down with all of you.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show. It really helps us out. And if you want to keep the conversation going, come hang out with us on Discord, where we chat about the campaign, behind-the-scenes moments, and all things D&D.
Until next time, travelers, may your rolls be high and your adventures be legendary. Thank you, listeners, for joining us on this episode of the Traveler Chronicles. We hope you enjoyed your journey through the world of Extrayus and the adventures of the travelers themselves. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, and subscribe to our podcast. Your support helps us continue to bring the magic of Extrayus to life. Want to be part of the story? Join our community on Discord, where you can chat with us and the travelers themselves. Share your own adventures and dive even deeper into the world of Extrayus. Don't forget to check out our videos on the Couple of Nerds YouTube page for even more content, including behind-the-scenes looks, painting tutorials by DNDWife, and so much more. Thank you for being a part of our adventure. So keep rolling those dice, and may your journeys be filled with wonder and excitement. Till next time, on the next episode of the Traveler Chronicles.